Hey everyone, it's Justine and we need to talk about something serious before we get into today's craft tutorial, and because I don't want you to get your identity stolen or your credit card information. And it is happening to a whole bunch of crafters on YouTube where you're suddenly getting a comment like this saying that you won a giveaway. Us crafters love to give away things on YouTube, Instagram, and what have you, but you really have to be careful when it comes to something like this. First of all, it looks super legit. You see my profile picture, you see my name in it, and it tells you won a giveaway. But if you look really closely, one of the things that you'll see is that the username itself, when you click on it, won't take you to my channel. Second of all, the name is strange. It's not just Justine Hovey, it's something like text me on Telegram or Nicegram or something like that, Justine Hovey. And they're telling you want a giveaway, but often they don't tell you what or give you any specifics. It's just in the account name, things like contact me on Telegram. And what they're doing then is if you actually do look them up and contact them on Telegram, is they're telling you that you won a great giveaway, some sort of crafty supply, and they need you to pay the shipping in order to receive it. I will never ask you for your credit card information. I will never ask you to pay for shipping on anything if you are winning a giveaway from me. So just beware of these comments, please. And it's just really important to stay safe on the internet. Speaking of staying safe on the internet, today's video is sponsored by Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN. If you don't know what a VPN is, it's a way to surf the internet anonymously and privately. But those are all really techy and kind of boring. So how does it help you in crafting? That's probably what's most important, isn't it? Well, what I love to use a VPN for or Surfshark for is to watch TV while I'm crafting. I am always watching Netflix or Disney Plus, but guess what? The selection here in Germany kind of sucks. And now I have access to all the countries in the world that offer Netflix and their libraries. So I can watch shows that aren't available here, or you can watch shows that aren't available on the US Netflix, but may be available somewhere else. And so whenever I'm looking for my favorite TV show or movie, I can generally find it with Surfshark. And as many of you know, I live in Germany and I'm originally from Canada. When I want to watch Canadian news, a lot of the times it will tell me it's not available in your location. Or if you want to access news from another country, and what the VPN will do is you can actually pretend to be in that country and fool the internet, and I can watch my Canadian news again. So that's what I use Surfshark for. It comes with a money back guarantee after 30 days if you don't enjoy it, and you can enjoy a 3-month free tier using my code. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Let's get into the crafting. We're gonna be crafting with Kraft. All right, we're gonna be making 4 different cards today, and we're gonna be going through a bunch of different techniques on each one of the cards. And the first one that I wanted to talk about is coloring on Kraft Cardstock. Now, the great thing about Kraft Cardstock is it just gives it a little step up from the white cardstock, but it still protects the general integrity of the colors. They may be slightly affected by the Kraft Cardstock, but not all that much. And so I absolutely love to color on Kraft Cardstock. And it usually takes a variety of mediums as well, depending on the brand and type that you use. And you can color with Copic markers, watercolor pencils, colored pencils. I'm using Prismacolor here and they're working fantastically. This idea is inspired by a class from Kit and Clowder, a coloring class. Just a heads up, I'm giving credit where credit's due because the color combination comes from this, as well as, how to color this in general. So if you'd like to check that out, I will link to that in the video description below. Now, I die cut this using a normal die. Normally with Kit and Clowder classes, you print off an image and then you color it in. But so I decided to add the body using a die cut as well. It just saved me some time from coloring and also adds a very deep black to it that helps bring out the black in the wings, which I really like. The second technique that you can do with Kraft Cardstock is run it through an embossing folder or a 3D embossing folder. This isn't anything specific for Kraft Cardstock, but I think it just looks really great on Kraft Cardstock. You can do this with any color cardstock you like. If you have any trouble with cracking, just give it a spritz of water before running it through the machine. Now, I like the fact that my 3D embossing folder was only 6 by 6 inches and it didn't take up the whole background. I thought that looks really cool. Having the plain cardstock at the top and the bottom helps balance it out. It helps give kind of the focal point to where I'm going to attach the butterfly to the card. So coloring on Kraft and using 3D embossing. And now we're going to get into a technique that has been popular for decades, but we often forget about. Probably because pesky white gel pens play a role, because for some reason gel pens just never really do work, do they? I'm using one from Jelly Roll today. This one worked well. Sometimes this doesn't work and my Uniball Signo works. I just kind of pick the one that works for me that day. And if I get frustrated with white gel pens, I go in and use a Posca paint pen. I find these to be the most reliable of all of the three, but they are different than using a gel pen. Okay, so adding some stitching to your card is a lot easier than sewing on a card and is my personal preference. So I think this card turned out just lovely. I love the elements. Kraft Cardstock's just so classy. I do want to mention this as well. It's going to depend on the Kraft Cardstock that you own. This one in particular doesn't do that, but if you go over top with sandpaper or a sand eraser, if it has a white core to it, you'll get that really vintagey look with the white seeping through, which could be a really cool technique. If you're enjoying today's card tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Help make this number go up. You guys made it go up so much from the last video, so thank you so much for subscribing. All right, back to crafting. So one of my favorite techniques for Kraft Cardstock is using your white ink and taking advantage of something you don't pull out all that often, I'm guessing. And I love stamping with white pigment ink. And the cool part is in my opinion, I could have just stopped here. I think the white looks absolutely elegant and gorgeous on the background. But there is one way that you can give it an extra step, I guess you could say. First of all, I like to double stamp it just to give it a little bit more brightness, but don't forget to hit it with a heat tool. That's really important, just for a few seconds to dry the ink so that it doesn't contaminate your ink pad next, and then also the fact that it doesn't smear afterwards on someone's hands. So next up, grab a dye ink or a pigment ink. Both of them will work just fine. I'm using an Oxide, so it's a hybrid ink, combination of the two. And you can see there, I just slightly offset my cardstock so that when I stamp it, I get a really cool white shadow. So I get the white, I get the yellow, and I get a darker version of the yellow, which is what this ink would look like if I stamped directly on the Kraft Cardstock before stamping with the white ink. So I get 3 shades. And it looks absolutely gorgeous, almost like there's shadow or snow on top of the leaves. It looks really, really wonderful. Easy technique, quick, simple. That card literally took like 2 minutes to make. And if you want to break up the Kraft Cardstock a little bit, don't be afraid to cut down your card panel by 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch so you get a nice white border around it, or mount it on black cardstock. And that will also help kind of tone down the Kraft Cardstock if you don't like the look of it as a full card panel. Next up, try your stencils or layering stencils on your Kraft Cardstock. I'm using Distress Oxide inks here. Pigment inks will work as well, but they will look a little bit different. And overall, I love the way that these look on Kraft Cardstock. I think adding any color ink to a colored cardstock looks great, and your Oxide inks will actually do this on all dark colors of cardstock in various degrees and various looks and appearances, but they do have the ability to be used on darker cardstock, which is really nice. But as I said, with Kraft, it's kind of a neutral color, so you can use your dye inks as well. And if you don't feel like you're getting a good look with your dye inks, that first layer, that big flower, ink that up using your white pigment ink, hit it with your heat tool, and then do your layering stenciling on top, and you'll be completely fine. So that's just a little trick. If your inks aren't looking great on Kraft Cardstock, stamp first in white pigment and you're good to go. All right, and the last technique that we're going to go into, or the last card I should say, uses my favorite technique that for whatever reason I've been just caught up in the glitz and glam of all these new products lately that I have completely been ignoring my favorite technique of all time, and that's heat embossing. So I've inked up my card using embossing ink, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab my embossing powder. Again, experiment with your embossing powders. You'll be surprised what your embossing powders are going to look like on Kraft Cardstock. White, of course, is going to be your safest bet. Black will work also really well. And then just depending if your embossing powders are opaque or transparent, will they show up in their true form on colored cardstock. Now I'm going to complete the elements for this card here, and I decided to play with something in my stash that I haven't had much of a chance to play with yet. And this is a cool set because this is a layering stencil without a coordinating stamp. So it just is a layering stencil and die set. So I was originally smushing my ink pad in there and then realized I wasn't getting the best results, so ink tool it is, or a blending tool. Now, the nice thing about PinkFresh Studios is all of their layering stencils that I own up until now, I just stick them in the corner and it lines it up perfectly every time. You'll notice that didn't happen with my stencil from Altenew in the first one with the rose, because they put 2 layers on one of the stencils to save you money and themselves money. I mean, in the end, you do still have 1 less stencil, so you're paying less for the set, but you are compromising with the fact that it doesn't line up in the corner. But anyway, this isn't an advertisement on layering stencils. This is just simply a demo on how to use the stencil, and I really, really love it. I think it looks really great. And then it comes with 1 die set that you line up and cut all of these elements out of, and I think that's pretty cool. So I die cut not only these elements that I inked up on Kraft Cardstock, but also a little terrarium, and then I was able to add all of the elements to the front of the card. In order to layer them all up here, I had originally just laid them all on top of each other, kind of got a look that I liked, glued down the base layer of all of the leaves, and then added in the mushrooms with some foam tape just to add a little bit of texture and dimension to the card itself. And the reason why I didn't just plop a sentiment on the background of this beautiful heat embossed background is because for me, it's a little bit too busy for my style. So my choices were either to cut it down further, so I have a nice white border and then add a die, or add some elements to help break it up a little bit. And I think adding the plain cardstock in the terrarium, the Kraft cardstock, on top of the pattern looks really, really great. So give it a try, mix and match backgrounds and textures and all sorts of things. So here's a recap. We've got the stitching, we've got the embossing folder, we've got the coloring, we have heat embossing, how to break things up a little bit when things get a little bit too busy, and then of course using your layering stencils, which we did a couple of times in this video. Experiment with different types of inks, you're going to get different looks and a variety of different cards, and lastly shadow stamping.
All right, today's video card tutorial used so many different supplies, MISTI, stencils, glue bottles, and so much more. And all of those tools we need to learn how to maintain, and they do require a little bit of maintenance. I know you never want to talk about maintenance in your craft room, but I have a video here to show you how you can maintain your craft supplies. I only do this once, maybe twice a year, but it definitely helps my things like my paper trimmer, my plates, all those types of things last a lot longer. So be sure to check it out, and I will meet you over there in the video.